Welcome to Fighting on Film, the podcast about classic and obscure war movies. From the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to cover it. I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
I'm Robbie of RA Military History.
Welcome back to another episode of Fighting on Film. This week we have a special treat. We're looking at not one, but two films. We are looking at Bravo 20 and The One That Got Away. Now, these are both films about the same event, which took place 30 years ago during Operation Granby, otherwise known as Desert Storm, the Gulf War. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode to what we normally do.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little bit of compare and contrast and see how the films sort of depart from each other on what they're actually covering.
And we'll still do alley tally.
Fave scenes, alley tally.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it twice, because why not?
Yeah. But we'll try and keep it brief, but we'll try and get through as much as we can.
Well, both films cover a lot of the same ground. So
They do.
It's the only way we could really tackle these two. And, you can't talk about one without talking about the other, really.
No, you can't. You'll see why when we start going into it. But I thought we'd kick off by talking about the cast of each film.
Yeah. Should we explain what Bravo 20 actually is first?
Yes. So Bravo 20 is a SAS mission just outside Baghdad in 1991. And they are tasked with finding an MSR, which is a main supply route, and seek out and cut a fiber optics cable so that the Iraqi High Command can't get in contact with their Scud missiles that are firing into Israel.
They're basically Scud hunting, aren't they?
Scud hunting, yeah. And that'd be a cool name for the film.
Yeah, why didn't they go? Yeah, damn. So Bravo 20 is basically the patrol's actual call sign.
That's it.
There's a couple of patrols that went out, and they're all gone. They've all gone from B Squadron, SAS Regiment.
Yep.
So that's what the Bravo stands for, and then the 20 it's their patrol number 2.
Yep.
So basically that's where it comes from. They're dropped off by a helicopter, so they're inserted by heli, and then they tab to the MSR, and they're looking for an OP. They're looking to set up like an observation point, aren't they? To
that's it, yeah.
Keep an eye on the road and see what's going past, and try and work out where these Scuds are.
Mm-hmm.
Because it comes a little bit later on, we should say that about a third of the Scuds that Iraq were launching at the time were aimed at Israel in an effort to bring Israel into the war, which would have destabilized the sort of NATO/Arab coalition.
Both movies feature this mission, and they were both turned into best-selling books after. One That Got Away was Chris Ryan's book, and Bravo 20 was Andy McNab's book. And obviously since, both men have gone on to be authors, historical advisors, documentary makers, public speakers. They've really built a big career off of these books. They're what we think of when we think ex-SAS figureheads, I think, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, when these films came out, I don't know, 5.
Right, yeah. I was 2 and 6.
I remember staying up and watching it when I was 9. I remember watching the first one. I don't remember the torture scenes in the second one. Maybe I didn't watch the second one, but I do remember the main climactic scene in the first part of it. So they're basically TV movies, aren't they?
They're a little bit more than that.
They're big budget TV movies.
They're big budget for the time. My first introduction to Chris Ryan was when I read Strike Back when I was on holiday when I was 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very gung-ho. You can see the parallels in some of the bits in these films.
So Andy McNab was the patrol leader. Sergeant Stephen Mitchell is his real name.
That's his real name, yeah.
And then we have Chris Ryan, who was a corporal. He is Corporal Colin Armstrong, but his pen name is Chris Ryan. I think it was Chris Ryan's book that was published first. His film, The One That Got Away, was produced first and came out first, didn't it? Followed by Bravo 20 in 1999.
So Bravo 20 was BBC production, and One That Got Away was an ITV production. For your casting, Bravo 20 has got Sean Bean, Sharp himself, in the lead role as Andy McNab. And then it has Kevin Collins as Chris Ryan. But that actor he's never been in anything big. I'd say Bravo 20 was the biggest thing he's been in.
He doesn't have a lot to do in the movie anyway, really.
No, he doesn't, no. So maybe that's why he's a bit of a lesser known And fans of the pod will recognise Richard Graham, who plays Digger, the Australian SAS member in the Bravo 20, as a Royal Marine from Ungentlemanly Act. So that's a nice little, nice little.
I didn't even notice, to be honest.
Yeah. I was like, I know that face. I know that face. So I had to look it up. And then One That Got Away features Paul McGann as Chris Ryan. He's from Withler and I, Monocle Mutineer. Very, very well-known face.
Hornblower, of course. He was in Hornblower too.
Hornblower, yes.
So they're both coming from Napoleonic War heritage behind them in their production histories.
And then David Morrissey plays Andy McNabb in One That Got Away. And he is quite well-known.
Most recently, I think I saw him in The Walking Dead.
He also played a version of the Doctor in a Doctor Who episode, one of the Christmas specials.
Did he? David Morrissey?
He did, yeah. He played a man who thought he was the Doctor.
Okay, and Paul McGann famously did play the Doctor once.
There's a nice little reference there, little cross-reference there. We do movie trivia on this pod. We try to.
There's quite a bit of movie trivia with this one. So the director of The One That Got Away is actually, quite well known. It's Paul Greengrass.
Yeah.
So he's done the Bourne movies, United 93, Green Zone. He went on to big things, basically.
He did, and he's known for that sort of shaky cam style, the handheld cameras, and you can definitely see it in One That Got Away. It's a lot more. I'd say One That Got Away is more visceral.
Yes.
In the terms of the shots, it's very raw. It's more basic, like a basic look.
To me, the way I would very basely describe it would be as being slightly more arty in its cinematography and approach.
I think you're right.
There's more lingering shots. The way it's shot is slightly more, I suppose, art housey in that.
There's definitely some metaphorical things going on with some of the shots.
Yeah. So there's like over the shoulder shots of him looking at the billboard towards the end, and the trek up to the fence, the border fence, is a good shot too. There's a few really interesting things, and then obviously with Bravo 20, it's a little bit more sort of shot in like a blockbustery type.
It's more Hollywood.
And that was directed by Tom Clegg, who has a history of doing sort of not unfamiliar with action, because he filmed a classic British cop show, The Sweeney.
He did.
Space 1999. And he also later directed a lot of episodes of Sharp.
Interesting, because of the Sean Bean connection there.
So he would have known Sean Bean quite well.
Definitely. The writer of this one is Troy Kennedy Martin, who is really famous for Kelly's Heroes.
Exactly.
His way of writing banter and writing soldiers that we all said way back in the episode of Peter Caddick Adams. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to it. It's an absolute cracker. But yeah, the banter is there. You feel like they're a unit more than One That Got Away. It tries too hard to sort of point the finger at certain people, whereas Bravo 20, I would say, is a more accurate representation of an SAS unit.
Of a unit in general, I would say. Like there's banter, there's jokes. Like one of the first things you see is like someone puts a breeze block in someone's bag and then they end up taking it all the way to Q8, So
there's more squaddy humor in it, and it feels more true. They feel more like real people, and you also, I think the bigger budget probably allows them to, but you get to see them pre-mission. One guy's getting drunk before he goes out and all that, so you just feel like they're more human in a way.
A more subtle sort of like introduction to the characters, in that we find out that they're friends, that they have banter, they're chatting. There's a marked difference between the two films, I think, in budget. And it's clear in that the Bravo 20 movie has a lot of sort of music that's pop music, recognizable music, rather than the One That Got Away, which has more of a sort of like sparse sort of.
It's got more of a score, isn't it?
It's definitely more of a musical score than a soundtrack in that respect.
But the BBC can use their blanket licensing fee thing to play all the songs of the period.
Got their money's worth out of that one. My God, there's at least like, you could probably put out like a soundtrack album, the Bravo 20 soundtrack album.
The Bravo 20 compilation album.
Featuring such hits as Should I Stay or Should I Go? And God, what's the other one? There's some like really random stuff in there, like Daddy Cool is in there.
Yeah. Desert DPM classics. Desert DPM discs.
Oh yeah, I love it. Now that's what I call Desert Storm.
The Gulf War classics. God, we sound like we're trying to get an audition on BFBS. So for this one, I found two contemporary reviews from the time.
I always love it when you dig these up.
So I've got one for The One That Got Away. Feels fitting because the movie came out first. This review is a little bit scathing. It comes from Brian Reed, who was the Daily Mirror's TV and film critic at the time. And his headline for the review starts with, "Desert Prats at War." He's setting his stall out really early.
He is.
So we've got The One That Got Away was a brilliant, riveting film, but it was clear to see why the SAS didn't think so. The Iraqis were portrayed as a shower of wide-eyed, incompetent bandits in Catherine Cookson headscarves who shot into the air yelling Allah. The hero, Paul McGann, who spent days walking 200 miles across Iraq with virtually no food or water in extreme temperatures, pursued by 1,600 soldiers, arrived back at Camp Tand, unable to walk straight away, with a few dodgy scabs around his mouth. "I didn't know Club 1830 went to the Gulf. Did you?"
Wow. It's pretty negative, that, isn't it?
And then he's got, like, in, you know, like when they section off a bit and it's got a word, it's just got in bold, dodgy.
Wow. Okay. Any rating? Is there a rating to it?
No, there's no rating on it, but I looked at later on at the TV guide and it gave it like 4 stars.
I wouldn't say it's dodgy. Now I'm gonna lay it out now before you do the next one. I haven't read either book.
No, I haven't either.
So I can't comment on how accurate the adaptation from the book to the movie is.
There's a lot of controversies anyway with both.
That
books.
kind of put me off because I'm never really been someone that's gone in for like the whole special forces, like big expose books, you know, like the guy that wrote the one about killing Osama bin Laden, etc. They've never really done much for me.
No,
but I must say I did enjoy both films in different ways.
Yeah, I like them for what they were.
Yeah,
you know. And now I'll read out the Bravo 20 review. Daily Mirror again. It's a different reviewer this time. And here's the funny thing: McNab is shown to be cool-headed, unflinching, and totally in control, while Ryan is a vain, self-obsessed, whinging moaner. Well, they do say the first casualty of war is truth. Now, I'm not one to name drop, but I met McNab once at a party, and he didn't much look like Sean Bean to me. So there you go.
So that's hinting at the, you know, the sort of rivalry that is apparent between the two of them.
Yeah, and that is a weird thing because I think, and now we'll probably talk more about the plot really. Oh yeah, interesting enough, both films filmed in South Africa.
Yes.
It's very odd. Same story for the movies, pretty much. Same locations. Well, not locations, but the same country filmed in.
I mean, it may well have been some of the same locations. It's difficult to tell because a lot of The One That Got Away is in the dark. They've obviously been trained by the same South African military advisors.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of the same kit, a lot of the same rifles, grenade launchers, and light machine guns as well. So you can tell that they have the same armorer, or that the film's armorer has drawn the same guns from the same armory.
Possibly, yeah.
That certainly hints at the sort of difference between the two movies in approach and tone.
McNab and Ryan are advisors on their respective movies. So obviously their influence is coming in as well. They're going to toe the line their book follows. You know, they're not going to put in anything different, I assume. You do get two very interesting films out of it, though, don't you?
Definitely. So I think the thing with it is that McNab is trying to sort of justify his role in the mission and explain that the reason why the mission was a failure wasn't necessarily his or anyone else in the team's fault.
No, it was the fact they got split up.
Yeah. Whereas with Chris Ryan's sort of book and film, there's a little bit more of the blame game going on. So there's like, we haven't got the right weapons, we haven't got the right intel. It's relatively negative towards McNab.
It is. It really and the characterization as well, and the lines that David Morrissey has to work with make him out to be like a bit of a mug.
He doesn't come across as a competent platoon commander or section leader. He just doesn't, because, you know, it shows him as being indecisive, and McGann's sort of like visibly flustered at points where he's like, come on, make a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to tab to Syria, or are we going to try and get to the heli point? What are we doing?
He even mentions, oh, can we take vehicles? He goes, oh, we won't need them. We'll walk everywhere. Every sort of thing that Chris has an issue with, Morrissey can rebuttal really quickly.
But flippantly.
Sorry, McNab. Yeah, really flippant.
Mm.
And even when you're first introduced to McNab in it, you're sort of introduced in a way. This is talking about One That Got Away, by the way, not to confuse listeners. McNab is almost introduced as if Ryan's never met him before, which I didn't like that sort of way. It introduced the character for me. And then McNab goes, "Oh, this will be a simple one, lads. We'll come back and get some medals."
Yeah. There's a medal in this for us, lads. He shouts towards the end, doesn't he?
"There's a medal in this for us, lads."
See, now we'll never know the actual reality of what
No.
were the causes. So doing a little bit of reading around it, I noted that there was issues with comms, issues with weapons inventory, issues with basic sort of like standard operating procedures. Like when they got separated, they didn't circle back around and try and meet up again and that kind of thing. There's certain things that the SAS and soldiers in general are trained to do that didn't take place from the accounts that are available.
I mean, there's loads of reasons why that might not have happened. You know, the adverse weather, they weren't expecting it.
Apparently, it was like the coldest winter in Iraq for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the lads did die of frostbite.
Two of them, in fact. Like one died during the firefight from hypothermia, and one, an older member of the platoon. That's another thing just to jump onto briefly.
No, it's fine.
It's difficult to sort of keep a straight linear flow on this one because it's two movies. We'll try
and steer it as best we can, but it's patchy.
It's gonna meander a little bit. So one of the members of the patrol is slightly older than the rest, and he's basically waiting out for his retirement's coming up. Is what's highlighted in both movies, and in the portrayal in The One That Got Away, he's shown as being almost sort of like senile and not knowing what the hell's going on at one point. In reality, that guy was 36. That kind of threw me. I didn't understand.
The actor's clearly in his like mid 40s, or like later than 36 at least.
And I can understand that he was suffering from hypothermia and that was impacting his judgment. I think his family also weren't particularly pleased with that portrayal in the first movie, because in Bravo 20, he's much more favorably presented, and his name's changed. So Bravo 20 changes a lot of the men's names more.
Chris Ryan got some flack for naming people as well. From my research as well, he did get some flack for that.
Especially when he's going under a pseudonym himself. That's kind of
There's a lot of like sort of things make you go, what really? You know, all the way through both movies, not from a sort of a moviegoer point of view, but also from like someone who is interested in the history of it. You're sort of like, well, would you have done that? Really? Like, what you're doing? And then when you compare the two, you're like, well, where's the truth? Because it probably lies somewhere in the middle, but how in the heck
there's been a number of books and documentaries made about this mission. So for non-British listeners, it's kind of in the pantheon of British military history now, especially within the special forces niche. It's quite well known. If you say Bravo 20, most people are going to have a brief idea. Like, it's a Gulf War.
It even gets referenced in British sitcoms as well. There's a throwaway line in one of the Alan Partridge episodes where they mention Bravo 20. And looking through like old newspaper archives to find those reviews, I found like, McNab's book breaks 1 million copies sold, and Chris Ryan's book is on the bestsellers list, and there's like countless W.H. Smith and Woolworths adverts being like, own the book and the video, like you can buy them both here.
It was a big deal when it came out. The books were big and the films were quite big as well.
They're probably still in print.
Yeah, the books are definitely still in print. I don't know whether the movies are still on DVD or whatever, but they're online. But as I was saying, there were numerous other documentaries and books written about it, and they all have sort of like different conclusions about certain elements that did or may not have happened. So it's almost impossible to sort of put together an idea of what actually did happen once the mission was scrubbed and they were trying to like escape. So a little bit more plot, just to explain where we're at. So they set up an OP, but they realize that they're right next door to a Iraqi anti-aircraft position, because Iraq at that point had a massive anti-aircraft network of all kinds of stuff.
I mean, you would if you had the whole of the USAF breathing down your neck.
Exactly. But they've hellied in, tabbed to the MSR, set up an OP, and then Like the next morning, they've realized, oh shit, we're right next to an anti-aircraft battery, which is like 100 Iraqi soldiers plus vehicles, etc. And
Yeah.
at that point, you would think we should definitely move.
You should skedaddle out of here, shouldn't we, really?
So they have bad intel, they're underprepared, and they aren't equipped as they would like to be. So both films reference all three of those elements as being an issue with the mission from the outset.
So at least that's one through line. You know, the locations aren't changed and things like that. You know, you could cut. You know, if you were good at editing, you could cut like a super cut of these movies, and it wouldn't be out of place, sort of thing. No man is trying to say like, well, I say I was here and I was actually like 10 miles in the other direction. You know, and they're not trying to say like the locations are wrong. It's just what happened is presented.
There's some confusion about how far they walked from the heli drop off to the MSR. There's some confusion about that.
Because in Bravo 20, they literally just dropped right on it.
But more or less, yeah. And then
would make sense why the helicopter took incoming and it had to drop them where they were dropped.
That's a good point, yeah. I've forgotten about that.
The older guy goes, oh, look, there's an AA site right there. And then they're forced to set up their OP there. Whereas in One That Got Away, they half kind of stumble upon it, but then they sort of don't because they walk up to an area and then
they're in like a wadi, aren't they? And they're stuck in there the whole day. And then eventually they get discovered by an Arab goat herder, a little boy, in both. And he goes and informs the AA battery there's some suspicious looking lads in the wadi. It's where the shit hits the fan and everything falls apart. But from that point on, the two films begin to show everything
completely differently. Even in the way that the lads discovered is completely different. Or that they're discovered, sorry, not the boy. So the boy in Bravo 20, he discovers the unit, comes over, and the older member of the squad, he's like, "Oh, come here, look, a bit of chocolate, you know, like don't be afraid, bit of chocolate, come on," like trying to grab him.
Yeah.
And then he runs off. But in One That Got Away, the old lad sort of is really stupid.
He looks up and then ducks, doesn't he?
Yeah, he looks up for like a bit too long than he should and then ducks down. Chris grabs him and's like, "What'd you do that for? Did he see you?" He's like, "No, he didn't. He didn't see me. And obviously, they've been spotted. You know, either way, that guy's shown as being to blame.
Yeah.
As you said, that's when the stark differences start coming in.
Yeah, so in Bravo 20, there's the whole bit where they hear like the impending noise of a vehicle and it turns out to be a bulldozer. Whereas in the One That Got Away, it's immediate contact. Like the Iraqis are immediately coming for them.
Yeah, they turn up on that ridgeline, don't they? And start making contact. Whereas in Bravo 20, Sean's like, right, everyone get together. We're going to start.
Tab into the heli site.
Hopefully, if we get further away, they might think that we're one of their patrols.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they make contact because obviously the Iraqis don't think they're one of their patrols.
No, that kind of makes more sense. They engage a number of APCs that approach them from a ridgeline. They lose their bear guns, their backpacks during the retreat. They open up, lay down fire, and then they run as fast as they can in the opposite direction and then dogleg back. So they aren't expected to be on the path that they look like they're going to be on.
The drills of Bravo 20 look more accurate to me.
We don't really see them moving much in the One That Got Away.
No, we don't. They don't. But when they do make contact, it's a lot more. This is how, or at least the movie's trying to show you how an SAS unit would attack an armored section. There's issues with One That Got Away where they have Law anti-tank launchers on them, but they're not used. Then later on in the movie, Chris Ryan just happens to have one when he needs one.
Yeah.
It's annoying from sort of a movie thing because you're like, well, he didn't have that on his backpack.
Yeah, that's true.
But then when you're looking at it from a historical standpoint, you're like, well, if you say you drop your Bergen and you didn't have it on you at that point, then you do have your Law on you at the end to make contact. Then that's where this is like a massive like map of like issues and problems.
There is, and like sort of like disconnects from one another and what would probably have happened. And it's a combination of both the two separate different approaches to the plot or the event, and then probably the difficulties of production and filming a film.
McNab or Ryan's not going to let you go, oh, hang on, let me just grab a copy of the rival book just to check how they done it. They aren't going to let you do that,
Well,
are they?
no. Well, if you were, being the advisor on a movie and you'd sold the rights to someone, you would believe in that product anyway. So you're not going to cross-reference with what Chris said or what Andy said.
No.
Vice versa.
But even if you were thinking of doing it, they're probably not going to let you. The movie after the firefight section, the two movies take a completely separate path. So One That Got Away concentrates on Ryan and his tab to Syria.
200-kilometer march to the Syrian border, and the two groups get split off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nice thing about these two films, that they show the two halves. We see McNabb's version of events, or what he experienced in Bravo 20, and then the One That Got Away, we see what Ryan experienced in his walk to Syria.
In Bravo 20, when they get split up, they're trying to they think they hear a helicopter or a plane overhead, so they try and contact it on their radio. Sean Bean, Andy McNabb goes, "Let's all convene here," sort of thing. We'll call up that aircraft or whatever it was, just to see if they can find us and double back on us. Like, wait here. And obviously, because of the wind and the rain, Chris Ryan's little section at the front doesn't hear them, so they walk off. But then in One That Got Away, they sort of just turn around and they're not there.
Yeah.
So you see it from Chris Ryan's perspective of they turn around and they're not there. It's not really a resolution, whereas in Bravo 20, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because obviously it was windy, they couldn't hear you.
With the One That Got Away, you kind of think, what? Where did they go?
And I'm like, but you were turning around every 2 seconds to look behind you and cover your six.
Exactly. You're checking your intervals, aren't you? You're making sure.
Yeah. There's too much sort of leeway sometimes, and you have to sort of suspend belief a little bit with it with either film. It gets confusing. So yeah, Bravo 20, then you're just concentrating purely on McNabb's experiences. Then it's completely with Chris.
So with McNabb, you have 3 or 4 guys. So it's the majority of the patrol. And they continue on with the plan. They're feeling the effects of the exposure and the hunger because they've left their bear guns behind. They have nothing with them. Although in both films, it does show that one guy going back to get his flask, and they basically decide that they're going to hijack a vehicle and make for the Syrian border.
And that's shown in One That Got Away as well, which I think is really odd. I mean, I know I'm going further on, but we sort of have to talk about them both. So Bravo 20, you don't get any of Chris's story at all, right up until the end, when he you get a little shot of him walking to Syria, and he's like, "Oh, I've nearly made it."
He's kind of mumbling to himself, complaining, isn't he?
And that's it.
Yeah, there's no effort really to show the story, which is understandable because McNabb wasn't there.
He wasn't there to see it. But then in One That Got Away, it also has its own section showing the events of McNabb's party.
Yes. So although it's much more,
it's brief.
It's more of a summary of what happened. Like, you do see them in the prison. You do see them get captured at the checkpoint.
Yeah, you do. Sorry, it's just an odd conclusion, because I'm saying, well, Chris Ryan didn't know any of this then, so he's probably getting all that from secondary sources.
They would have all debriefed, and he would have heard and spoken to other members of the patrol that survived later and gotten an idea of what happened to them. So we could include that in the book and the film.
It's just confusing, isn't it? Because you're just like, well, then one film doesn't even bother with another man, and then the other film bothers with both.
Although to a much lesser degree, the representation of Ryan, yeah.
But then One That Got Away uses the sections with McNabb in to show McNabb as being an inept leader. So then they're the issues that come in. You're like, well, actually, are you including them just to have a go at the person that you don't like anymore? Well,
it doesn't show any sort of overt torture either. It's just them in a rough shape in custody.
Yeah. And then you got that bit at the end where he's like, "We'll come back, lads, and we'll bloody have them." And it's done it's sort of done in the sort of cringy way.
Yeah, it's not the best of scenes, and it could have been written and handled better. I think that part.
McNabb is just shown to be like a bit of a fool.
It's not a generous portrayal of him or basically anyone in the film, really.
No. And then Bravo 20, I've said it before, but Bravo 20 portrays Chris as just an average guy.
Yeah, there's no malice sort of thing.
No.
Despite it being made after the fact.
Yeah. And even at the end, Sean Bean says, "Oh, well done, Chris. He got back." And I'm like, "Well, then, where's the beef then, guys? Come on."
It seems kind of one-sided, or perhaps McNab took the high road.
Possibly. Yeah. No, there is a point there.
Maybe there was disagreement or fallout, and McNab just basically took the high road on that one, and didn't want to criticize Ryan. And basically, you can also put it down to Ryan is commentating on who he thinks is responsible for the mission failure. And basically, McNab was the patrol commander, so some of the responsibility, if not the blame, sits with him. And perhaps that's how Ryan sort of framed it within his own mind, because there's also the gung-ho major who's basically giving them their intel, and he's very much like, we're trying to get B Squadron out there, and we're going to get medals, and
in both movies they're portrayed as a bit of a very sort of officers of their era, I would say.
Yeah, they're very Ruperty, aren't they?
Like, oh, don't worry, chaps, you'll be back within the hour for tea and biscuits. They're very sort of that kind of officery class, aren't they? So you can see that McNab and Ryan had beef with like officer class, I think.
Yeah, I think they both probably resented the fact that the mission wasn't properly prepared.
Both movies do portray that, I think. So we don't want to get bogged down in the ifs and the whats and the whys. So shall we do some good old alley tally?
We've got plenty to talk about anyway.
We have. Let's get into it.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
So, Matt, Alley Tally this week. I think it's a little bit more strong than last week's.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff here, and it's not all because it's Special Forces gear. Some of it's interesting in that it's what they had on hand when they were filming it, I think.
To start with, shall we cover One That Got Away's alley first?
Yeah. So in terms of weaponry, it seems that the guns were drawn from the same armorer.
Well, it says at the end of One That Got Away, with special thanks to the South African Defence Force.
Right, okay.
So possibly came from their armories.
So we're looking at basically a lot of what are supposed to be M16 A1 or A2s. I'm not sure, because they all have the underbarrel grenade launcher shroud, and they're all supposed to be M203 40mm grenade launchers.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't quite look the same, because you can tell by the scallop of the way that the M203 attaches at the rear. And there's also like a striker lever or indicator on what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And what they have is a 37mm flare launcher, which is kind of like a civilian legal version that doesn't fire low velocity grenades.
Oops.
So they look almost identical, and they both have that sort of like push forward barrel that you pop around and you close up. And they're all focused.
They're all sprayed up desert. As well.
Yeah. And I think the spray jobs differ between the two, so it looks like
they do. I think
they're redone at some point if the guns are exactly the same.
They're both wearing Desert DPM, which I think is really cool. I love Desert DPM. I think it's one of the best camouflage designs we ever had. I just think it looks really cool.
It does, especially when it's like paired with green 58 pattern webbing.
Come on. What, any fans of my Twitter account will see that I went a bit mad on Gulf War sort of kit and weapons a few weeks ago.
That's at RM Military History, if you don't already follow Robbie.
I bloody love it. So that's my sort of alley pick, really, for both. You can cover sort of both.
They're both wearing pretty much the same gear, same weapons.
Yeah.
One cool thing is the FM Minimes, the light machine guns they have. One of them is an experimental model with an experimental sort of like stock that's angled weirdly, apparently.
I like it. You definitely get more mini action in Bravo 20 than you do in One That Got Away, I think.
What it is there is Bravo 20's bigger budget allowed them to replicate what the men actually had. There were 3 mini-minis, and then everyone else had M16s with 203 grenade launchers underneath barrels. So you do get more of probably an accurate idea of their loadout. Although in Bravo 20, in one of the scenes where they are trying to get to that checkpoint, one of the lads, his mini-me basically turns into an FN mag.
That's one that got away.
Is it? Oh, that's my mistake.
Yeah, that's Bob.
It is that.
That's
It's Bob, and he's sort of like on a railway track or something.
Yeah, and he dropped down and he's putting a belt into a.
That's it.
Well, like an FN, and it looks like I was like, is that Jimpy? What the fuck's happened there?
See, I'm getting my Bravo 20 movies mixed up.
The issue is we've got the alley tally this week. The guns are the same, and the fatigues are the same. Although in Bravo 20 they hold on to their Bergens way longer, which makes more sense for certain bits.
Yeah. I think that's because they change the time scale in which they are breaking contact significantly.
That makes sense.
So in Bravo 20 it's shown a lot more. You see more of them in that sort of initial breaking contact segment.
Yeah. And then obviously you've got a bit in One That Got Away later on where Chris Ryan takes on a Iraqi APC on his own and an Iraqi truck. Knocks it out with the law and then proceeds to go around the back of it and shoot all the men inside.
And what kind of truck would that be that he took out with the law, Robbie? The most alley piece of kit in the whole film.
Well, yeah, of course. So in One That Got Away, it's too dark and you can't really make out what the truck is. But in Bravo 20, when they make their initial contact, the Iraqis pull up in a Bedford RL, and I was, very, very happy. Because if you fan of the pod, you know that I love Bedfords. So the alley tally was for me this week was Bravo 20 with not only its Bedford inclusions, it's got Bedford RLs and J5s, which is like you barely ever see a J5. I was quite impressed. Unfortunately, the RL gets knocked out by law, which made me sad because, Bedford RLs don't have a good track record with films. In the Wild Geese, they get blown up as well.
I mean, that's a great way to go out. It's a waste of a law, but it's a great way to go out.
Also, Bravo 20 has got a BMP, which is really nice.
It does. And there's a great scene where he throws what looks like a white phos grenade in the back of it.
Yeah, that's Digger, the Australian.
Which is, quite the thing. It's nice. You see him like counting off the fuse and then he throws it in. Yeah, so I must assume that there must have been 3 or 4 Iraqi guys that did not want to come out and brave the charge of...
Brave the SAS.
Yeah, the charge of Sean Bean and the lads, which we'll come to in a minute, I'm sure.
So One That Got Away, that's pretty much it for Ali, really.
There's a lot less kit in The One That Got Away.
There's a lot less kit in it, and there's a lot less shots where you see it up close. I'm not disputing whether Chris Ryan did what Chris Ryan said. That's not what this pod's for. But there's a bit where he's trying to sort of get the M203 grenade launcher open and it's cold. I quite like that inclusion because it showed that he's getting affected by the weather.
Yeah, that's true.
But then did you think that both movies... I mean, you're the firearms expert on this pod. Did the movie portray the M203 accurately?
With Bravo 20, it's kind of weird because it gives it an almost sort of bazooka-esque. So when they're at the range zeroing, which is a nice inclusion on its own,
Yeah, there's a GIF on the Twitter account I made of that. Please go and check it out.
Zeroing at the range before heading out on patrol was a nice inclusion. It kind of gives it an effect of like a rocket launcher.
Yes.
Whereas it's not. It's a low velocity grenade. It's an M79. It's a thumper. It's thump. Whereas in Bravo 20, it's like, and it's sort of
yeah, you do get a bit of a weird sound effect on it.
And that's because they're basically firing flares. I think it's a flare launcher. It's a 37mm.
So they use blank flares or something.
It's a pyro thing. So it's not sort of the best representation of an M203 40mm grenade launcher. At that point, in 99, 90...
96 is One That Got Away.
You didn't really see them that often in films.
No. But then also I've got Bravo 20 has a really good use of laws. There's a lot of laws in it. Yeah,
in fact, in that first contact, the first shot is just a law coming out of nowhere.
It is, yeah. They try and they hit the BMP twice, don't they? Which is doctrine though, because if you watch, any sort of BAOR fans or ex-BAOR people listening will know if you've watched Soviet Encounter, the quite famous British Army training film from the late 80s, your point is to try and get a BMP to deploy its troops.
You're breaking their momentum of attack. You're forcing them to deploy.
You're slowing them down. So, and that would make sense as well, where when the British Army did go into the Gulf, we were on a sort of trying to stop an invasion of the Russians through Germany tactics. So it sort of makes sense why they would want to knock out the BMP first anyway.
Well, Jesus, you would want to knock the BMP out, wouldn't you? I mean,
well, it's got its 30, it's got its big cannon.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes complete sense, and
which somehow keeps on firing, even though
maybe. I mean, that's why they hit it twice. So the first one sort of hit the driving compartment, and the second one,
possibly,
they put another one into it to stop the gun.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of gratuitous shots of that cannon going off, and it's clearly the same shot, like repeated.
Some other interesting stuff that appears in Bravo 20. There's a 40mm Oerlikon
Yeah, there is.
with the Iraqi AA battery.
And a Bofors as well.
Oh, it might have been a Bofors, actually. I might be getting mixed up. No, I think it is. It's a 40mm Bofors.
Yeah, which is really cool to see. Just a Bofors in a sort of non-World War II movie was really nice to see.
I think there's also a Czech Beza on the checkpoint.
They're really blink and you'll miss it. Czech Beza, really odd inclusion. Like sort of, you never see them out of Churchill tanks, do
You
you?
never see them in anything really.
No.
But yeah,
God
Czech Beza. That was interesting.
God knows how they got them. And then the only sort of non-alley weapon alley this week, I quite like the taxi in Bravo 20.
Mm-hmm.
The old Chevy, the 55 Chevy taxi is quite nice.
Sean Bean behind the wheel. All the lads calling shotgun. Yeah, definitely.
Gun in it, yeah. And he's like, how'd you work this bloody thing? You know, it's like quite funny. How'd you work it, mate? I quite like it. Yeah, he's Yorkshire in that movie, pure. But Andy McNab was born in Southwark in London. What could you not have asked Sean to try a London accent?
I mean, Sean, interestingly, with Sharp, the character is supposed to be from London. Supposed to be from like the East End as well. In Sharp, he should have had like a bit of a Cockney or like a London accent going on, but he didn't. He just, went for like slightly RP Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, it's more clipped. It's definitely more clipped.
But in this, he's definitely much more guttural, which I think he's trying to like do tough NCO.
He's really good in it though.
I really like both performances. I like Sean and Paul's performances.
McGann does sort of serious brooding quite well.
He does.
Both movies have mocked up vectors as well, mocked up to look up as AKs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can spot that from the 5.56 mag profile in some of those like night shots. You can definitely tell.
So yeah, I mean, apart from that, I've not got anything else for Ali this week.
That's about it, really.
Chris has got a weird German, which looks like a German field cap.
In both films, actually, that appears.
But he's only wearing it for like a split second. I thought either that's Chris wrote in the book, oh, I bought my German field cap with me, or they've seen it in Bravo 20. They've seen it in One That Got Away. And like, oh, we have to have you in that cap.
Yeah, I think he does mention what he had on him because he talks about his boots not being army issue.
Ah, that's it. Yeah. Well, then that would be Ali, wouldn't it? That'd be genuine Ali. And then Chris Ryan also says that apparently he wore a desert smock or a Denison smock.
Yeah,
possibly. But then there's no evidence to back that up. So either he had it in his Bergen and got it out later. Who knew?
I don't know. I've seen accounts where it says like they all were wearing like 40s stock like desert smocks.
I mean, it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility because there's like 70s BAOR and 80s BAOR training films that show some people in certain roles wearing smocks.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also infinitely possible that they just thought they were like holdovers from the North Africa campaign, where in fact, like,
yeah, maybe they did.
They're like they were 60s production Paris smocks, and they just assumed they were that old. Who knows?
Yeah, they could have been like mountain parkers, couldn't they? Just like really sun bleached. Who knows? So, Matt, do you want to regale us with some of your fave scenes this week?
I don't know whether I'm going to nick one of yours, but I think my favourite scene from Bravo 20 is probably that first contact, that sequence.
Oh, it's good.
Because it's really good. It's I don't know whether it actually happened like that, but it's really good in that it's a nicely shot sequence of some lads taking on APCs.
I think as well that it's not only just them taking on the NPCs, it's the way that it's done.
I also like Sean's narration.
Yeah, that is nice.
In the movie, like there's a constant narration where it's very much driven by bravado, isn't it? His narration, it's very gung ho.
Definitely.
And he talks about you might as well go at them.
If anyone says they're scared, they're not. All that sort of thing. Like I had this written down for my fave bits as well. If you don't mind me talking about it as well.
Not at all.
When he says like, oh yeah, we were getting ready, and you got the guys on the mini-me's like checking their mini-me's over quickly,
opening up the feed trays, checking, making sure the belt's sat properly.
He's like, come on. They're all sort of like gearing themselves up, which I think that's quite. I've not been in contact myself, but I think that's something you'd probably do.
Yeah,
you definitely.
And at the same time, Sean's like shouting, "Talk to me! Like, can you see them yet? Trying to keep that situational awareness.
Yeah. And it's like, stand your ground, all that sort of stuff. And people shout stand too, which is always nice to hear in films. I think there's just more military dialogue in Bravo 20 that helps it.
Yes, and that might be an element of the writing styles between McNab and Ryan.
Yeah, well, Greengrass wrote One That Got Away.
Yes.
So, he maybe isn't going off of having written. I don't know at that point if he'd done any military movies. But then again, Troy Kennedy Martin has coming from he's written Kelly's Heroes. He's written Z-Cars as well.
So he's done like police shows,
Men in the Services sort of stuff.
And plus he served himself, didn't he?
Yeah, of course he did. So it comes through a lot more. And I think that, I don't know what will come, the conclusion we'll get to, but for me, it's why it's a stronger film. I'm just looking at it from a film point of view. I think it's a stronger movie, whereas One That Got Away is possibly a stronger character study, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's how you can decompartmentalize them.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Another great thing about that scene is that they fan out into a firing line and they open up. They knock out the vehicles with the laws, and then Sean McNab basically decides that they're going to attack the Iraqi position, which isn't shown at all in The One That Got Away. It's breaking contact when we're getting away from this. We're not going to attack.
Yeah.
So they basically bound forward, and what that means is it's firing maneuvers. Some of the lads are laying down cover while others are moving forward.
And they also shout like moving as well,
coming through and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think one of them shouts out that he's reloading and that kind of thing. And then there's also a nice bit where I think the character's called Vince, and he tells him where to put the mini-me. It's like, put the mini-me here. It's like he's indicating where to like set up the mini-me to cover the retreating Iraqis.
Definitely.
So there's nice little touches. I think that's my favorite action scene.
We're talking a lot about Bravo 20, but there is a lot more action in it. Also, there's bits towards the end where they meet contact at the checkpoint, and then not only do they do that, later on they meet a little bit of contact when they're close to the Syrian border as well. So you get a more accurate portrayal of what happened to them. And you see a lot more action.
The two films sort of come back together at that checkpoint part.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
But they differ on that as well.
Differently, how it actually went down.
So with The One That Got Away, it's very chaotic, and I believe they have an Iraqi guy driving the cab still.
Yeah, they do. So in One That Got Away, they're sort of, what do we do now? What do we do now? And then they see a car, and it's like really opportunistic. And they bundle into the car. There's no one in the taxi. It's just the driver, I think. And then they get him to drive to the checkpoint as if they don't know where they are anymore, which is another weird thing. So they're somehow convincing this man to drive them where they want to go.
Yeah.
And then they're giving out map references and things. But in Bravo 20, they turf everyone out of the taxi, and McNab drives them to the checkpoint. So at least they get to the same place. It's just different means of doing it. But then I think me and you were chatting. We think, well, hang on. There's no way you'd allow a civilian to drive you to the Syrian border, or at least to try and do that.
No, well, what would you have to gain by that?
What would you gain from it? And two, if they're sympathetic to the Iraqi cause, they could just drive you into a military checkpoint anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense for me anyway. That's just
conjecture. If someone looks into the car and sees a bunch of lads in combats and tooled up to the nines, they're not going to go, oh no, it's fine, they've got an Iraqi driver.
Yeah. Oh no, they pay for their fare. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I think for me at least, McNab driving to the checkpoint makes way more sense. And then obviously they get found out and they fight away. It
breaks up a little more in Bravo 20. So it shows two of them swimming the Euphrates, I think it is.
Yeah, the Euphrates River. Yeah. Well, apparently one lad drowned doing that.
Yeah, well, one of them is shown as being hypothermic or dead or drowned. I don't know. They're in the bull rushes and.
That's it, and they don't show that in Bravo.
McNab ends up in a drainage ditch, sort of culvert.
And then he's found. That's how he's found, and he's found like that in
both.
In One That Got Away as well.
Yeah.
So at least that's accurate. Then they both agree that's how they were found. So that's something. But for me, I something I like from One That Got Away, and this was purely from like a movie, a cinema goer's viewpoint rather than a do I believe the truth. It's where Paul McGann takes on an APC in a truck on his own. He initially thinks that it's like a civilian truck.
Yes, he does. I know the one you mean.
And you get this little shot. It lingers on his face, and his little face drops, and you're like, "Oh no, he knows it's not civilian. It's an Iraqi truck. Oh no, what's he going to do? Is he going to run? Is he going to stay?" And he because he's Chris Ryan, ultra tough, badass Chris Ryan, he stands his ground, and he frantically tries to load his M203 up, and then he sort of launches one at the truck, and it hits, and it's a big explosion.
Yeah.
And then somehow magics up a law from absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
Which is a bit. Where the fuck are you keeping that, mate? Is GTA did, like when in GTA,
it's a video game trope right there. Yeah.
Pull out a gun out of your pocket. He does that with the law. They extend. Possibly he could have had it in his. He could have had it in his smock. It's not put on.
Yeah. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. So he pulls that out, knocks out the APC, and then casually walks around that and guns down everyone inside. And then there's one lad, and he's run out of ammo, and he runs at him with his little combat knife and takes him out. And it's such a one-man army trope. It's very much, look how cool the SAS are. Look what they can do. Look how much of an army man I am.
I think in terms of cinema, it's almost probably included to break up the monotony of watching Chris Ryan walk.
I think it is. I think because in that part of that movie, it's just Chris walking. So if he makes contact there, then that's another little action scene they can put in.
There's no way of knowing whether he actually did or not because
no, there's not. No, and there's loads of controversy over that anyway. But it's as a movie, it looked cool. It's all shot at night.
Yeah, the One That Got Away isn't frightened of doing night shots. No,
not at all. And it uses it as a nice use of night vision as well.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's really cool. But then I think it's probably the budget comes into play. Bravo 20 uses a lot more stock footage from the war. So it doesn't, it doesn't need to it doesn't need to pay to have tornadoes flying in it. It shows you tornadoes flying in stock footage. And then it has BBC news reports. Obviously, that's where the BBC element comes in, that they use news reports from the time to set context. So I like Bravo 20 for the context it set up. Like it actually felt like I was in the Gulf War, rather than One That Got Away just sort of plonks you in, and you're sort of meant to know that it's the Gulf War. And obviously, me watching it a few weeks ago, not knowing 100% everything about the Gulf War because I'm 27. I wasn't born when it happened. It was nice to have that extra layer of context that Bravo 20 gives, because it makes the movie a little bit more timeless.
Yeah, it does. It does let someone who doesn't know the backstory of the war into the story a little bit more fluidly.
But part of that was it really for me. There were some a bit gross out bits that were a little bit odd.
I mean, that's the thing with Bravo 20, obviously, whereas The One That Got Away shows Ryan's escape, which is a phenomenal feat of endurance to
incredible
walk 200 kilometers with basically no food or water. And I think McGann's performance is quite powerful. He does sort of portray some of that, the struggle, and it must have been really, really horrible walking across the desert on your own, knowing that your mates could be dead, and not knowing whether you actually, when you get to Syria, are they going to help you?
Yeah, who are they going to even know what you're doing?
Because
there?
Is the border a solid line? While you've got Ryan, the other side of the coin is you have McNab and the other prisoners that were taken. And that's where Bravo 20's final act is probably stronger, I would say, than The One That Got Away's.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely, it's got more to go on. And I think that's what makes it stronger. To redeem sort of One That Got Away a little bit, you do have Chris Ryan sort of breaking down when the Syrian farmer who helps him,
he doesn't understand,
gives him British sovereign, and he gets all offended because of it.
He just doesn't know what to do with it, does he?
know what to do with it, and then Chris Ryan sort of breaks down.
Yeah.
I thought I like that because I was like, oh god, the man's finally cracked.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in interviews since, I've heard him talk about, he visualized his daughter talking to him,
Right.
that kind of thing,
Yeah.
which none of that makes it into the film. So I don't know whether that's something he only felt he could share later on, or who knows. So we should probably talk a little bit about the scenes where the McNab and the other members of the patrol are basically an Iraqi prisoner in custody.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very visceral, aren't they?
As soon as McNab's pulled out of that culvert, he's beaten up.
Oh yeah, they're like,
and then by the time he gets to the prison, they're all in rough shape, and they're trying to force them, I think, to confess that they're Israeli,
so they can use it against them.
Use it against the coalition.
No, I'm British.
I'm just a sergeant, and no, the officers don't tell me what I'm doing. They don't tell me nothing.
I know we laugh about it, but it's like I can feel for Sean because he's like getting absolute shit beaten out of him. So he's just trying to make him believe him. And it does.
He would. Exactly. And he's basically trying to buy them time, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And it's that old thing of like, they need you for information, so they're not going to kill you. Whatever they do, they're not going to kill you. Because you haven't told them what they want to hear.
But they make his time there pretty unpleasant.
Oh, fucking hell, they pull his teeth out as well, don't they?
There's a very shocking sort of like dentist scene where he's like, are your teeth still bothering you, Andy? And he's like, yeah. Well, this man's a dentist, and then he starts pulling his teeth.
Yeah.
That's
so I need him on his back, and you're like, fucking, what's he gonna do to him? They pull his tooth out, but then at the end of the film, his teeth are fine, which I thought was quite funny. But that's just continuity. But yeah, no, it's really horrible.
And to prove he isn't Israeli, he goes, within, after like a good 3 or 4 days of torture, he goes, I can prove I'm not Israeli. I'm not circumcised.
That's it.
So, they have poor Sean pull his kecks down, his trousers down, and then they all laugh at him, and he has a laugh. And it's a very odd, breaks the scene.
It breaks attention.
It does. Yeah. And then the Iraqi secret police interrogator slaps Sean in the crotch with a ruler or something.
Yeah.
And then we're straight back into the visceral nature of that torture.
I mean, I can get why he did it.
Yeah.
But come on, Sean. Protect the crown jewels. Come on, son. Sean's getting the absolute shit beaten out of him. Then he sees his mates, and then he sort of realizes his mates are there with him. So he gets a boost from that.
Yeah.
And then they're talking at night, and then the Iraqi guy's like, no talking. And it's like, but they don't come and do anything about him. I think it's quite funny. The guards are shown it's a bit silly.
One of my favourite scenes from that half of the film, or that act of the film, is the one where I've forgotten the character's name, but he's brought in separately from the other lads on the back of a truck, and they have to drive through a family of
the grieving
angry Iraqi family members, and they take him off the truck, and he's basically thrown on the floor.
Oh, that's the lad. That's Ray.
Yes,
that's that guy called Ray. Yeah,
his catchphrase is "fucking outrageous."
Fucking outrageous.
Which is it is great, and that's classic Troy Kennedy Martin, isn't it? One of the Iraqi fathers, the grieving father, comes through the checkpoint somehow, and he's beating him up.
Yeah.
And he pulls out a Webley.
Yeah.
Pulls out an old Webley, and he's gonna shoot him. And the secret police basically pull the Webley off him and take him back outside.
But then you get the weird thing in Bravo 20 with the Pope.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Pope plays a weirdly prominent role in this film. But there's a scene at the beginning before the first contact where I think it's Vince and he's having a shit.
Oh, it's the Australian guy.
Is it Vince that helps him?
Vince might have helped him.
Anyway, someone helps the Australian guy have a shit, and he's doing it into a bag, and I assume that's because they don't want to leave anything behind, which is fair enough.
They don't leave a trace of themselves, which makes sense.
And there is a funny part where they've put his shit in someone else's bag.
Yeah, and he's like, "Carry your own shit." Says Sean Penn. Yeah.
But then later on, it's kind of mirrored that. Maybe I'm reading too much into that cinematically, but perhaps it's mirrored later on, where Sean is having to do some pretty horrific things in an Iraqi latrine in order to get Ray his fags.
That's weird. That whole bit. Yeah, I think it's for me. It was just showing their ordeal,
Mm.
but it like the way the scene was played out, it went a little bit too much into it. Like the guards saying, "Oh no, Andy, you're not finished."
Yeah, he's gone from singing
Daddy cool.
Daddy Cool to lick the
Yeah.
shit off your fingers, Andy.
Yeah,
It's an odd exchange.
it's weird. But then it conspires that Andy's only done all that so he can get fags for his mate,
Yeah.
like you said. So it's like, oh, look how much they went through,
Mm-hmm.
but they still were mates and they still do things for each other that they might not want to do, but that's what the SAS do,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I assumed it was for, but it was just weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's
bodily fluids in movies. Let's not.
absolutely gross.
Yeah. Disgusting. But then Andy McNab's really flippant about it. Oh, I had to lick shit off my hands for your fags.
Yes, he is.
That's horrific. What are you doing? It's fucking horrific.
Oh my god, it's just so gross. But I mean, I haven't read Andy McNab's
No,
book,
I've not.
so it's probably in the book, but I don't know.
Christ.
But yeah,
If anyone's got the book, look up at the back, and look up in the index and see where it says poop. God.
But I did read online that some of the other sources that have commented on their treatment.
Maybe that's why it's called Bravo 20, because it's number 2.
Oh my god.
Sorry. Continue, please.
Fucking hell. To contradict some of the scenes with the torture, I did read on a couple of websites how there was contradicting sort of accounts of how badly they were treated and tortured, and whether it went beyond just like roughing them up and beating the shit out of them, basically. There's stuff from the Red Cross and such about what their condition was when they were repatriated.
Yeah, whether they were actually roughed up as much and all that.
Again, it's just the nature of these two films, and that you would probably we just aren't going to know. How
would Chris know how Andy got back, and how would Andy know how Chris got back? It's sort of each man can say that what they want because they were there and the other man wasn't. And I think that's half the issue these movies have. There isn't one. There might be a narrative that someone's written from a completely objective point of view, but that's not got a movie about it.
Yeah.
So you can't do anything with it, can you?
They're both massively contrasting films in their approach, tone, and budget, obviously, and what they're aiming for. So I think with Greengrass, the one that got away, the portrayal is a lot more arty, and that's necessitated by probably the narrative that he constructed around Ryan's account, and partially possibly some artistic choice.
I think so, because there's that whole section where he encounters the checkpoint that's been shot up, and he imagines it like all exploding and runs off.
Yeah, and
that's a bit of an odd scene because it's not shown as a dream sequence, but it could be. It's very confusing. I just got a problem. I just don't know. I think I said earlier, like, that's a character study of Chris Ryan's endurance.
Yes.
And Bravo 20 is action movie with enduring a tortures
after. Clegg's approach to Bravo 20 is much more straightforward.
Yeah.
Action movie with some of the character elements being driven by Troy Kennedy Martin's dialogue, and they both kind of portray the struggle and fortitude of their main characters, in that we're seeing Paul McGann's Chris Ryan struggle to cross the desert on his own.
Sure.
200 kilometers, no food, no water. So that's a human sort of human fortitude story in that respect. And then with Sean Bean's Andy McNab portrayal, he's being tortured. So he's having to have that resilience and that struggle within.
That's its similarities, yeah. But then I don't know. I just think Bravo 20 for me is the better film because it's more watchable. Like the director knows how TV movies work because he's done Sharp, he's done the Sweeney, he knows how long form TV content has to grab the viewer. Like I wanted to sit and watch Bravo 20 the whole way through, whereas when I was watching One That Got Away, I was glancing at my phone because for me, every single shot lingered just a bit too long. Like I was skipping forward 10 seconds on my video, like getting to the next scene sometimes.
Robbie's short attention span strikes again.
It was just because, here comes loads of trucks and here comes Chris looking at the trucks. Well, this sequence is going to go on like for 20
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. And I think I did myself skip ahead a little bit in places.
I think that's where Greengrass is trying to get over his like vision, because he wants it to be like, look at the distances, look at the impossibility of it all. Whereas Bravo 20 is like action, getting to the checkpoint, torture, home.
Yeah.
It's very much bang, bang, bang. Whereas
there's a clear narrative path.
Yeah.
Which I think the story of Bravo 20, the way that they've portrayed it, is probably a better story. It has more elements that they can work with. It's very difficult to make, not to say that directors and films haven't accomplished it, with other similar films where there's a lone individual struggling to overcome or travel a long distance, because there are films that do that very, very well.
Well, like how the first Rambo is like cited for being actually quite a really well-made movie these days. Whereas like, the later ones are really gun-ho, but then people see the first Rambo like, oh, actually no, he is like an actual character with an actual.
Yeah, and the second one too, where where he goes to that small American town. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's sort of the way that like this, the One That Got Away sort of shows it. It's like, look at how one man can do this, whereas Bravo 20 is look at how a group of men can get through this. And I think it just comes down to, one, whose story you prefer, and two, whether you prefer lone wolf or you prefer unit action.
And also, I think it depends on the viewer and what they're wanting as well.
Yeah.
So as always, our opinions are subjective. One of the things we like about the podcast is that you guys share your opinions with us via Twitter and in the comments.
And if if you've seen both, I mean, let us know, because we really love to know what you think, because this is one of the first movies or sets of movies that we've done where there is genuine conjecture, genuine controversy, and
it's the first attempt where we've tried to compare.
Yeah, and I hope you think we've done a good job. We might have gone a bit too Bravo 20 heavy, but I think it's because we might have personally enjoyed them a bit more. I know that I did.
I enjoy Paul McGann's performance more than I enjoy the movie, I think.
Yeah, he's good. The movie's not great. Sorry, Paul.
I think that's fair to say. So I enjoy the more ensemble nature of Bravo 20, which makes sense because obviously Troy Kennedy Martin knows how to do an ensemble piece.
Yes.
He's done the Italian Job. He's done Kelly's Hero. It makes sense that he can do a group of men and not sort of lose any of them in the sort of telling of the narrative. Whereas within Greengrass's movie, I feel like we don't really get to know some of the members of the patrol at all.
Yeah, they're throwaway a little bit.
And it almost feels like when you watch it, it feels like they just got a group of lads and put them together. Like none of them really knew each other.
Even though some of them are recognizable faces, they're not necessarily recognizable names, shall we say?
Yeah, the actors, yeah.
It's interesting where both movies end with McNabb, but they end with McNabb in completely different circumstances.
Yeah, so at the end of Bravo 20, it shows them getting home, and there's a little bit of a voiceover again from a bit of narration from Sean Bean McNabb, and he talks about the psychiatrists talking to them all, asking whether they've got PTSD, and he sort of like jokes that the psychiatrists were more strung out than we were, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's clear that I think all of them have suffered since. Like that bravado was.
Gulf War syndrome's a big issue, wasn't it, coming from that war? But yeah, and then obviously in One That Got Away, it shows McNabb in the prison, sort of rotting away, as a sort of like, oh, look at this emasculated man now. look at how he's fallen, which is sort of, I think that's how it portrays him. I don't think it portrays him fairly, whereas I think Bravo 20 does. And I think only by watching them both you can sort of come to that conclusion.
And I think it's telling that these two movies are basically the only British portrayal of the Gulf War in film. There aren't that many Gulf War movies as it is.
So maybe with the 30th anniversary, hopefully we might get one, get a dramatization of those experiences. Because the 30th anniversary's definitely brought it to the fore, and that's why we thought we'd cover them on this pod.
Yeah, I mean, it made complete sense that we'd try and tackle these two together. But I mean, it's only one tiny aspect of that war. I mean, it was a very short actual, ground war, a few days.
100 hour.
Yeah, exactly. But it just made sense that we try and look at something from the period, because it's in danger of becoming one of those forgotten conflicts, I think.
So yeah, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up a bit.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, guys.
Definitely interact with us on Twitter at Fighting on Film. Leave a like, a review on whatever you're listening to, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye, guys. Catch you later.
Bye.